exhilarating. In 1919, for the newsreel cameras, he performed a plane-to-plane transfer without a parachute. Locklear was hired for pictures.
This Omar Locklear was a very popular man, very interesting man, very daring young man, and he took all the stars up. And every time he came to the studio, I succeeded very tactfully in avoiding him, you see, because I was scared to death of the guy. I wasn't scared, but I wasn't particularly interested. I was having too much fun on Earth. So he stopped me in the hallway and he said, "I know, you're Leatrice Joy." And I knew who he was, you know. And I made like I was very weak and about to die, you see, so he wouldn't think I was too robust to take up there. But anyway, he said, "You know, you're the only star. Now, come on now, let's make a day of it." So I said, "All right." So he said, "Right now." So I said, "All right." So we went out. And this plane, of course, when you see the ones of today, if you can catapult yourself back to a little cracker box, so help me heaven, with two single seats, one in the front and one in the rear, you see. And I got in this thing, and we start zooming up like that, you know, and I, as I said, I always controlled myself in a moment like that, and I said, "Now you're in it, now enjoy it, you know, and just be your age, you know." And he made an eminent curve, one of those things like that, you see, and then the reverse of it, and all those kind of things. And I thought I had had enough, you see, so I made some kind of gesture to him, and I did this, meaning, take me down, you know. I was throwing in the sponge and giving up completely because I'd had enough of it. And he did this to me, and I thought, "What's he so happy about taking me down?" And all of a sudden, he zoomed up, and he went into the most daring of any of those stunts, the falling leaf. You go down and down and down till you practically pick buttercups, you see, and then he stops. And he ran to the back of it, and he picked me up, and he said, "Congratulations, you're the only star with guts, Miss Joy. You're the only one who asked for the falling leaf. Yum, 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 yum." And I didn't have the courage enough to say, that was my sponge I was throwing out, you know.
Locklear was particularly interested in an actress called Viola Dana.
I looked at this great, big, handsome man, and he looked at me, and he said, "Would you like to go up with me?" I said, "Yeah, yes, I would. I'd love it." And he had green eyes, too, and I want to tell you, we looked at each other, and up I went with him in one of those old jennies. I afterwards found out, well, that was it. I guess we fell in love immediately. Done everything in a plane that's to be done. Loops, we done, one day we did something like 25 consecutive loops, and spins and barrel rolls, and we'd go under between telegraph poles under the wires and chase our friends down Hollywood Boulevard if we saw them. I'd carry a bunch of old lipsticks, and that's how low we'd fly. We'd throw them down, and then you could see them look up and say, of course, I think they got after him, too. He had to leave town. He hid out for about a week.
Locklear continued to appear at shows around the country, keeping in touch with an anxious Viola Dana by telephone and telegram. "There's nothing dangerous in the work," he insisted. "I do absolutely nothing that could be called a risk of life. Everything I do is planned methodically and is absolutely safe." Fox brought him back to Hollywood to star in The Skywayman in 1920. Aerial scenes were photographed at the DeMille airfield next to the oil fields.
He was making a picture for Fox. They were starring him in it, and he was doing some night flying, tailspin, and he said to the director, he said, "Now, when I get down to the level of the oil wells, take the lights off me, the sunlight arcs. Take those lights off me, and I'll know where I am. I can come out of it." And he went into the tailspin, and they never took the lights off him. And, of course, he into an oil sump. I guess there was practically nothing left of him because those jennies, you know, they're very fragile. Somebody picked me up I started to run for the plane, and somebody said, grab her and take her home. And I guess I was just kind of crazy. I couldn't believe what had happened. And when you're young, those things are very shocking. I don't even like to talk about it.
Fox rushed the Skywayman into release and announced that a share of the profits would be given to the families of Locklear and his co-pilots. 10%. 2 years later, Universal made a serial called Around the World in 18 Days. Aerial stunts were increasingly popular with audiences, and increasingly hazardous for the men who tried them, like Gene Perkins.
And I was at Universal working with Perkins, and they had an episode in which, at Marsh Field, they wanted the Perkins to come across in an airplane and drop down and give the girl who was on the top of the train some documentary papers or so forth. So they had hired some fellow with an old Jenny plane with a rope ladder on it to go out and come around, and I was doubling the girl on top of the train.
There was a young pilot carrying passengers at the field, and Leo Nomis was flying for me to do the change, and if you do it right, it looks simple, because you come up behind the train and you set the man right down on it. But the pilot has to watch, because there's an air turbulence, and it'll make the plane, you know, if you over-control, it'll wipe back and forth. So this kid didn't know it. He went to Universal and all the studios, and told them that he was a stunt pilot, that he had flown the plane change for me, and so naturally they accepted that. And so they hired him.
Well, of course, the fellow went around, circled around the train. Train was doing about, I guess, 45, 50 miles an hour up there by Marshfield. And instead of going behind the train and coming up the back end of the train, he came straight across the side. Now, Perkins, instead of standing in the bottom rung of the rope ladder, he hung.
Of course, Gene hadn't been a regular plane changer. He didn't know these things. So when they went to do it, he climbed down on the end of the ladder. And when you do that, you don't hang at the bottom rung, because if they don't get, you have to pull back up again. So what I would do is take 2 holts, you know, in the foot, and I'd come down, and if he didn't get close enough, I'd come back up and rest my arms.
Well, he went down so low that he hit the windows of the train, and they dragged him across the top of the train. And when the plane got over on the other side in a bank to try to get up, his ribs were broken, and he couldn't climb back.
And Gene shook his head. He couldn't hang on, and he turned loose and fell in a plowed field. And his legs, bones went through his shoes into the ground, and it looked like he was standing knee-deep in a hole.
Then they wanted, later on, in that particular serial, for me to go out here to a semaphore on the railroad tracks and match up the fall. And I said, I don't remember reading anything about this in here. And they said, no, but they said, well, we want to pick it up where Perkins fell and went down. I said, you know, he got killed in that. And they said, yes, you know, we just go ahead and pick it up right there. I said, you don't pick it up with me, because I'm not going to jump off of there and double it and do it for you. And which I didn't do, because I didn't think it was cricket, so to speak.
MGM's epic, The Trail of '98, was a story of the Klondike Gold Rush. Shot on location, no expense spared.
The Trail of '98, made by MGM, was probably one of the most disastrous pictures of that era, because we lost 4 men in one scene, in which we only recovered 2 of the bodies.
Stunts were usually planned inch by inch, but natural hazards, such as dangerous rapids, had to be left mainly to chance. They were far beyond the calculated risk.
There was 8 stunt men that went up. The 8 of us were in 2 boats. And we were to go in the center of the river, and there was more water pouring through that gorge than pours through the Mississippi River at the highest tide.
up we go. The cameras are all about 7 cameras stretched out down along the river, two of them on the tracks following down in those little Ford cars. And so the rocket went up and all these boats shoved off. Well, I want to tell you, my boat, when I looked out there and I came down that first deal and went down into that first swell, there was a wall of water in front of me that was breaking back this way, higher than this room, which is a good 8, 9 feet higher, or maybe 10 feet, falling back. Well, of course, I shipped water immediately.
We were in the center of the stream, and the waves were like breakers in the surf. And we were going 35 miles an hour because the camera were on a Ford car with flange wheels, and they ran down a railroad track right down the gorge. And they had to go 35 miles an hour to keep even with us.
And I had oak sweep oars in there. I had 3 or 4 of them in there. I was on the sweep oar in the back. And to try to hold that boat straight, it got about 1.5 feet, 2 foot of water in it. And I lost control, and those sweep oars would just break. I was just bending them, trying to keep that thing straight. Well, of course, all boats were going over, and men was going out, down, and everything. It was just a catastrophe.
Safety ropes had been run across the river, fitted with loops. The second unit director was supposed to arrange for the loops to be reinforced with wire, which would hold them open.
But he didn't. There was no loop in the end. When it done, it just wound up, and it's like a hard twist rope with frozen stick. So the 2 men that grabbed the rope, when they slid on the rope, they slid down to the end of the rope to get the loop because their hands are cold, and they come down and there's nothing but a frozen, twisted rope, and they couldn't hold on from the ice water on their hands, and they had to turn loose. So they tried to start swimming to shore, and one man, he made it. But he made it part way. And the other man, we saw him going right on down the stream, and there's a big boulder, size of a small bungalow, that the water would hit and spew up over, and he went into that, and it hit and knocked him, and we knew he was dead. And he went on down into the glacier lake.
I finally got the boat landed ashore. Not landed, but got out of it and let it go. Then we started searching for help anybody that was stuck. And we found men here and found men there. Well, we searched for 10 days. We finally found 2 of the bodies.
But we never did find Red Thompson's body, because what happens in that ice water, when the body sinks, the gas doesn't form and they never rise. So we never did find Red's body. So that was the heartbreaking part of it, because I had gotten him the job. I had recommended him because he was a good type for a certain man. And I thought, well, now if I hadn't gotten him the job, he'd have still been here. But that's part of the hazard of the game.
Yesteryear, you know, it was just a different day, just a different day. I wish I could really explain. I wish I could really give what's in here out to you there, of the greatness of the old days. They made good pictures too, pretty good pictures. You know, with a box lunch and a $2 bill and a roll of film. That's what it was. but it was great.